What's up, y'all? Welcome to Flex Friday. Listen, I've got a bone to pick in today's episode. I've got a bone to pick with the fitness industry. I've got a bone to pick with all the fitness influencers. I've got a bone to pick right now with my sleeve because it won't go down after that flex. But listen, I have a bone to pick because there's a lie that's being told in the fitness industry. There's a lie that's being told by a lot of these fitness influencers who have only ever done lifting and traditional fitness and have never been athletes in their entire lives. And coming from somebody who's been an athlete for 15 years and somebody who's done strength and conditioning programs for Olympians that I've trained and this, that, and the third, this lie is that you cannot build muscle and burn fat at the same time. Let's talk about it. I don't know why people think about this way. Like, you have to bulk and cut. Like, you can only build muscle and gain fat, or you can cut fat and also cut a little bit of muscle. Like, it's just not true. And I think it comes from one, miseducation and of how the actual systems of the body work, and two, it comes from it's just kind of the way things have always been done when we look at the bodybuilding fitness culture, right? I'm not talking about athletes. Athletes have been put onto this for years, that you don't have to do all this nonsense. But in the fitness culture, like general fitness, for whatever reason, there's this ideology that we have to bulk or we have to cut, but we can't gain muscle and burn fat at the same time. And it's complete nonsense. And I personally don't really like the idea of bulking and cutting for the regular guy. Now, if you're gonna be a bodybuilder and you're gonna compete and all these other things, that's okay if you know how to clean bulk properly, because almost nobody clean bulks and uses real whole foods to actually do the bulk, and it's healthy foods and they actually eat enough. Almost nobody does that. Most people do a just disgustingly nasty, dirty bulk, and then they're mad when they put on a lot of muscle really fast, but then they've got so much fat that by the time they cut all the fat away, half the muscle's gone too, and now you look exactly the way that you did when you started. You messed up, not our fault. Anyway, that is the way that most people view the process of gaining muscle. So again, if you're going to clean bulk properly, I don't necessarily have a problem with it if bodybuilding is your goal. If functional, aesthetic physique is your goal, I don't believe that there's any point. I don't believe it's sustainable to constantly be bulking, cutting. That's doing a lot. It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of preparation, especially, like I said, if you're going to be doing it properly. I think the more sustainable way to go is how most athletes train, at least from my gymnastics background. This is the system that we used, which is simply high protein, slight caloric deficit. That's the system. Like, that's it. High protein, slight caloric deficit. The reason that I think this is good for most people is it's by far more sustainable, because you're kind of gonna get in a rhythm of how this works and how to eat in this way, how to exercise in this way. And it's just gonna make it easier because you're not constantly switching the diet, you're not constantly switching the program. It's just an easier, more sustainable method to follow. And I believe that it puts you in a good position for functionality, because the truth is, when you're bulking, like for real bulking, you're gonna probably lose some flexibility, you're gonna probably lose some endurance, you're gonna lose a lot of the functionality of that physique that you're building, unless you are hyper intentional about supplementing with some stretches, supplementing with cardio, supplementing with all these other things. And so again, I'm not saying that it's impossible to follow the old school bulk cut methodology and still stay shredded year round. But what I am saying is that it's way easier to stay shredded year round if you just eat and exercise in such a way where that is the norm, where we're not going with these wild fluctuations and screwing with our metabolism. If we just make the norm being low body fat and high muscle and eating and exercising in such a way that supports that, then we'll be able to maintain that forever, all right? So here's the reason why this works. Protein is what helps with muscle synthesis. Period. If you have enough protein, you will be able to build muscle regardless of if you are in a slight caloric deficit or not. And when I say slight, I'm talking about a couple hundred calories per day. I'm not talking about 1,000 calorie deficit from your resting metabolic rate to what you're actually intaking. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a couple hundred calories a day to help us lose the body fat, getting some of that HIIT cardio in there. That's going to help us stay lean and shredded all year round. We're not going to be gaining fat because we're going to stay at maintenance or just barely below maintenance in our calories. But then if we have a high enough protein intake, 1 gram of protein per pound of body fat, or even slightly higher than that, then we're going to be able to synthesize muscle just fine. And people who say otherwise are lying to you, all right? Is it a slightly slower process to synthesize muscle when you are at caloric maintenance or slight deficit? Yes, it is. However, over time, if you're going to be doing this for more than 2 or 3 months at a time and you really want to make this a lifestyle, it is perfectly doable to maintain those calories or be slightly under and then have a high enough protein intake. So the way that I do this is literally the formula that I use, is I wake up and I intermittent fast until lunchtime, usually 11:30 or noon. So I'll intermittent fast until then. I'll eat lunch, good whole foods, chicken, steak, etc. And I'll have a protein shake with it right then and there because I've got to keep the protein intake high, all right? What I'm then gonna do is I already know the calories and the macros that I've had for lunch. I had nothing for breakfast except water, maybe some black coffee. And then for lunch, I know here's the whole food macros and calories. Here's my protein shake macro and calories. I know that later on in the day after my workout, because I tend to work out in the afternoons, that I'm going to have another protein shake then. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add all of that together. My whole food lunch, my protein shake that I had with lunch, and the protein shake that I know I'm gonna have later. Add all of that together, throw it in MyFitnessPal, throw it in the First Form app, whatever you choose to use, Trainerize, whatever. And then what we're gonna do is look at my macro and caloric budget. So let's say that I'm wanting to be at around 2,000 calories per day. That's gonna keep me right at maintenance or just below it so that I keep the body fat low. And what I'm gonna do, because again, my protein, by the way, is also going to be set. This is all preset. I know my caloric budget and I know my macro budget, but my protein's still gonna be very high. So what I'm gonna do is subtract that lunch and that protein shake I know I'm gonna have later from my overall caloric budget for the day. And what that's gonna do is show me, okay, here's how much you have to eat for the rest of the day. So when dinner time rolls around, here's the amount of calories that you are allowed to consume based on this caloric budget. Here's how much extra protein you need to get in to hit your protein goal. And here's the allocation of the other two macros, your carbs and your fats. And then all I do is design my dinner around that, and then I'm done. So really, all I had to do was have a lunch prepped or delivered. I use Factor, you can use HelloFresh, you can use Trifecta, all sorts of other services that are like that will literally tell you exactly what the macros are that you're eating. So all I do is make sure that I've got a healthy, high protein lunch with my protein shake. I add in that second protein shake I already know I'm gonna have later in the day, subtract the sum of all of that from my caloric and my macro budget, and then I make sure that dinner fills that gap that's left. And that's it. And I just set the numbers up in such a way where it's very high protein and right at or slightly below caloric maintenance. That system allows me to maintain shred literally year round. Like, I don't go through a season where my abs don't show. I don't go through a season where I'm not still continuously building muscle. I'm bigger now than I was 6 months ago, and I'm bigger 6 months ago than I was 6 months before that. And the reason it works is because the building blocks are still there. Despite anything else, the building blocks are there. Body fat stays low because the calorie count, muscle synthesis stays high because of the workouts and the training styles that I'm using. We'll get into that in another video, but also because the protein intake is there. If you give your body the building blocks, guys, everything else will take care of itself so long as you have the systems in place to support it. So I just wanted to use this video to squash the myth that bulking and cutting is necessary, and I believe for the best functional year-round physique, if you want to stay shredded 365 days of the year, this is how you do it. If you've got questions, be sure to comment below. Share this video with somebody else. If they think that I'm dead wrong and they want to talk about it, share the video with them. If you know somebody that could use some advice like this, who wants to stay shredded 365 days a year, send this over to them so that they can give this technique and this method a try. As always, if you're interested in training, head over to supermanshred.com, and I will see you on the next Flex Friday.